The Nuts and Bolts of Writing, Season 2, a podcast where we talk about literature, the ins and outs of writing, and how to actually start writing.
Hey there, everybody. It's your girl, DePunk. And we are here on the nuts and bolts of writing. We are going to be talking about yet again gaming. And today we're going to be talking about a very unique game called Dear Esther. So, without further ado, let's begin. Gaming has evolved from the basic pixels of the pioneering 8-bit games of Pac Man and Super Mario to full fledged cinematic experiences pushing the boundaries of digital animation, design, audio engineering, and most importantly, storytelling. Gaming now rivals, and in many cases surpasses by a long shot, film in terms of full and fulfilling storytelling. With its freer structure for the audience, as the player, to explore locations and uncover lore within a game's story, gaming has taken story and character to two new heights and depths. Interaction is gaming's primary unique aspect. Unlike a film, the audience becomes the player. Essentially, the audience becomes the character and main actor for the story. In this sense, the audience is immersed and experiences the story in ways that film is cut off from. Some games prioritize gameplay over storytelling. However, some tip the scale in favor of the latter. One such game in this category is 2013's Dear Esther. Created by the acclaimed English video game company The Chinese Room, Dear Esther explores the process of grief and emotional transcension through a vague character reflecting on the loss of his wife. Throughout the game, as the character reveals through mystic soliloquies of science and religious reveries, that the accident is indirectly their own fault. This adds another weight of guilt into the mix of grief and loss. The game lacks much interaction. Instead, the player is left with no choice, but whisked into the immersion of being drawn across the harsh landscape of a desolate scrub brush island. The lack of choice is fatalism played out, much like the character forced to process their own loss and realize life, like death, is inevitable in its juggernaut of events. Today, my collaborative partner and close friend, the talented Fortunus Games, and I will explore themes explored in Dear Esther.
Hi, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed playing Dear Esther with you. It was a really emotional experience for both of us. I hadn't played this game since 2012 or 2013, and it was great to be able to visit it again. So, the first question we'll ask to explore this game is, what do you think the game's story is?
Excellent question. Dear Esther is a very immersive game. Many people have accused it of being just a walking simulator, but it is a beautifully immersive game. I think the main story of it is, as it's revealed with the different clues and the soliloquies provided by the main character, I believe it is about a man, probably a medical doctor, who is struggling with extreme depression over the loss of his then pregnant wife, Esther, and he is trying to process that grief. But in his grief, he realizes that life has just this terrible nothingness, and he lapses into this sort of nihilism, and he begins to neglect his health, and he's almost on a path of deliberate yet slow and gradual suicide. As we hear him talk about his different health problems, his mind is lapsing because of the health issues affecting his mind, like fever, delusions, infections, and this man is taking random cans of paint and like basically etching out, chemical compounds on the cavern walls and things like that. And I think the overall game is basically a man mourning the loss of his wife and maybe the only source of his happiness and meaning of purpose in life.
Right. What do you think of the characters in the game? Like, besides the narrator and Esther, we hear about these other people, such as Donnelly, who is an 18th or 17th century explorer who was charting this distant Scottish island in his travels. And during this time, he was recording the history of someone who had lived on this island, a man called Jakobsen, who was of Scandinavian descent. And one of the reasons why he had moved to this island was so he could pursue, property and build property and eventually get a wife. But unfortunately, that dream never materialized. And in the second level of the game, when you're ascending the hill, you see this old house at the top of the hill, and it's empty. And it doesn't look like it's from the 17th century, but, this is when the audio sound bite of Jakobsen plays, the narrator talking about this person called Jakobsen and how lonely he was on this island. He was a shepherd, I believe. And yeah, as you explore the house, you hear more about Jakobsen and how Donnelly was writing about him. So what do you think is the link between the narrator, who is a modern day person, and all of these people in the past?
I think the link is that this is essentially this is an allegory or maybe a representation or even a commentary about loneliness. And loneliness is a persistent hunter that hunts us all down, and no one is exempt from it. No matter what the time, no matter what the location, no one is exempt from the ragged, dogged pursuit of loneliness. And I think also, too, I think many of us have dashed dreams or goals that were never realized because of external circumstances or just the strange things of fate, or as to quote from what I saw last night, it was a canon event. I was watching the Spider-Verse just so in case anybody wanted to know. But I think that's what it is. I think the significance of Donnelly and Jakobsen, I think it deals maybe as a parallel of the main character's own life. Perhaps Donnelly and Jakobsen formed a very unique and singular friendship, and that brought meaning to their very desolate lives, just as the main character has found consolation in his relationship with Esther. And I think it reflects on such a severe state of loneliness that we experience as human beings, that sometimes we connect with a particular individual, and that in itself gives us purpose and joy in life. But at the same time, this doesn't solve all problems. We still may have unmanifested dreams or goals or realizations, which, you think about it, Jakobsen never got to get married. Who knows? Maybe he didn't want to. Maybe his friendship with Donnelly was enough, and he's like, this is cool. We'll just be, two dudes chilling on an island, or it could signify the stillbirth of something, and that stillbirth could also be a parallel to Esther dying before she can give birth to she and the main character's child. It could be interpreted in many ways. I think with Dear Esther is that it's very vague, because I think it's open to interpretation, just like life. I don't think a lot of things in life are set in stone to be interpreted as logical fact. I think a lot of things in life it's meant to experience as an open interpretation.
Right. If I remember correctly, was there any proof that Donnelly and Jakobsen actually knew each other? I was reading on the Dear Esther wiki, and it seems like they may have never met. I'm not sure how Donnelly found out about Jakobsen, but maybe he just saw it as like a historical archive thing. Like he found out about this person somehow, and he's reading about him through documents or finding proof of his existence on the island, but I don't know if they ever actually met.
That's a good point. Again, it's very vague unless we really gather up evidence. I guess one could infer that from how Donnelly is referring to Jakobsen. It could be too. Maybe Donnelly is projecting a lot on Jakobsen, having never met him. Like maybe he's just projecting a lot of ideas and ideals onto the man. I think some people will do that. Like we'll find an account of a dead person or something, and we don't meet them, but we project a lot onto them.
I think the main character whose name is probably Paul, I think he's projecting onto Donnelly because at the very end of the game he says Paul Donnelly and Paul Jacobson and Esther Donnelly, right? So maybe that's their full names, or is he so delirious that he's mixing up all these people? We don't know. So is Esther descended
Or
from Donnelly, or is he projecting Esther onto Donnelly? And is he projecting himself onto Jakobsen? Because he never got married. Well, while Paul did get married, but he lost his wife. So maybe that's why he's projecting himself onto Jakobsen. And Donnelly's the one who's charting Jakobsen's history. Maybe Esther's the one who's charting Paul's history because maybe she's the one who took the initiative to get to know him.
that is a good point. And then also too, I mean, not as profound a an epiphany, if you will, but maybe Paul is descended from Jakobsen, and maybe he's saying he's the Jakobsen that did not marry because he lost his wife. So maybe it's like, oh, I never married because my wife is dead.
Right, exactly. And it never came to fruition, like the idea of them having a family. Because at the very end, you see that little shed with the little nest. Remember the three eggs and stuff? Like that never happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that never happened. And I think we saw under the water in that one cavern, um, where there was that abyss where we go down and we see a baby bassinet.
Yes, exactly.
So this is actually very, this is good. Like, and it's very dreamlike, because dreams are never clear and concrete.
Mm-hmm.
Everything fades into this blurry blur, and um and there's so many references in this game that you really have to watch it and pay attention to it.
Right. What do you think of the biblical references?
Very good. Since we're segueing ourselves into biblical reference, I mean into references, um, the biblical references are done tastefully. It's done in a very elegant, modern, very Anglo way of thinking. And Anglo, I mean British. I didn't mean American Anglo, which I'm not going to comment on that. Um, oh, I do want to comment. This is not the time, Tete.
It's
Back
not
down,
it's
girl.
not Comstock.
No, back down, back down. I gotta hold myself. Um, but it's done very tastefully. It's done in a beautiful way that makes you almost want to embrace the idea of faith, especially when you think about uh, the epiphany of Damascus, and being unblinded by becoming blind, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which, the blinding is pretty much just the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's basically the shattering of hubris, and in the shattering of hubris everything is clearer, because hubris is a great blinder. And what
Mm-hmm.
greater hubris is than Paul being blinded, this very proud religious authority. And Paul is the hardcore, persecutor of the other faith. And what other way but to break this proud man by rendering him blind, and him being forced to take the help of the very people he's been harming. But where does this parallel go? It gets a little vague. Maybe this is Paul, from what we can infer. Maybe he's led a very arrogant, empty, cold life, and maybe this bled into Esther's life. I mean, maybe as much as he loved Esther, maybe he wasn't the best husband. Maybe he was cold or distant, or maybe they had tensions because of his alcoholism. And now he's truly broken because he's lost her and their child. And this has been his Damascus moment. I would have thought of a better analogy. Um, but as somebody who's read the Bible back and front so many times, I would have thought of a better analogy than Damascus. But I think in the moments of delirium, I guess this would make sense.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember what was sprayed onto the rocks at the very end?
Yes, I did. And this is where it's telling it in the forward way. So when we first see it, it's in reverse and it sounds very grim, but when it's put into forward motion, it imparts it imparts a it imparts a message of hope.
What was it?
That I'm trying to remember. It's been a while. It's been about 2 or 3 months since we last watched it.
Yeah, I can't
Um,
remember what it was. It was from the Bible, though, right? It was something about Paul.
it was about. You know what? I'm actually just going to Google that because I am tired. I had a very interesting weekend. So let me Bible verse in Dear Esther.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. Okay, biblical text. Da 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 da. Okay, and this is I think it's Acts 9 verses 3 and 9. Wait a minute, what is this about? What on earth? This is giving me all sorts of things with the wiki.
Yeah, the wiki is just mostly the audio stuff.
Okay, I think I see it. So, and as he journeyed on to Damascus, it came to pass that he drew nigh unto Damascus, and there shone around him a light out of heaven, and he fell upon the earth, and he heard a voice, and of course, it's just telling him about what he says, and but rise and enter into the city, and it shall be told thee what thou must do, and that the men that journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing the voice, but beholding no man.
Mm-hmm.
So, hmm. That's unusual. I don't know. It
Yeah.
seems. I don't know. I think it. I think we would have to play the game, and
Yeah, I'm trying to look for the images of what's on the cliffs, but I can't find it right now.
I'm gonna try to Google it on YouTube. This is a very interesting podcast, people.
Yeah, we're just going off topic. But yeah, while we look for it, do you consider this a game or do you think it's a walking simulator with no action or puzzles?
I feel. Let me just go over here. I feel like it is. I feel like it is a walking simulator. Um, I feel like it's more like an immersive cinematic experience in the first person POV than it is a game. I think it's very beautiful. It's psychologically heartbreaking. But at the same time, just hearing a voice that's disembodied, it's really hard to get a feel for anything really. I mean, we have the environment and what we're doing, but without really seeing and understanding the character, because the character itself is very vague, just revealing snippets here and there. It's a little frustrating for me anyway. I find everything else very beautiful. I kind of cried a little bit at the end. But it's only because of the voice actor's delivery at the end. That finally it delivers, but for the first 20 to 30 minutes of the game, it's rather frustrating and meandering, and the only thing I can say is that I really enjoy the immersion of the graphics.
Okay, I found it. So it's Acts 20.
Oh shit, okay.
Yeah.
And let me just Google Acts 20 and see what that does.
Yeah, it's actually pretty long. I think they have parts of it. So, like, something about Paul traveling. When the uproar had ended, Paul sent for the disciples. Yeah, on the wiki, it doesn't say specifically where in Acts 20, because Acts 20 is pretty long.
I actually just read this because I remembered this, and I don't think that's it. This isn't it. This is not it.
Yeah, I
This is not
guess
it.
people don't care about Dear Esther enough to be accurate.
I don't think so. So basically, you know what? I'm actually just, you know what? It's been so long since I've actually studied the Bible. The last time, y'all, I cracked open actively a Bible was 2014, 2016 at the latest. So that shows you Acts, Damas. Wait, this just gets Paul here. Paul's. Oh, because Paul. What one dumbass? Damascus. Oh, blah blah blah. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be King James. Everybody loves that version. I don't know. I feel like I think it's just the couple verses. Like as he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shone a light from heaven.
Yeah, I think it's that.
I think it's just that because I mean, it wasn't that long. It seemed longer just because it's a maniac painting words on a mountain cliff. But you know what? I've seen people in my area do that, like people on train tracks. Instead of like graffiti that says whatever whatever, they'll put Bible verses, which I guess is a little bit nicer than putting, I don't know, the F bomb
Yeah.
on the wall, or saying, this man gets kittens.
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, so
Gog and Magog.
oh my gosh.
But
I have,
yes, I think we should move on to the next question now.
yes, let's move on to the next question. Sorry for that diversion, people. The next question is, what kind of game, what can this game offer that other types of games cannot offer? What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I guess it's more immersive, like for the environment, but unfortunately, you can't pick anything up or interact with anything. So it's quite limiting, but it does feel like a walking simulator, but like I don't really see it as a game. It's just like more of an experimental, almost kind of like a movie, like an interactive movie.
Yeah, it's a bit like an interactive movie that you can experience. I mean, that said, the only way you can truly interact to its full potential is to go into Gmod.
Yes, like me, I made this. It's provided in the description, but I went to Gmod. There, it was ported to Gmod, so someone ported all the Dear Esther maps with all of their beautiful glory into Gmod, and then you just play a character there. So I chose Jack, the silent protagonist of BioShock, and I just had him fight monsters, summon a bunch of people, do random stuff, like speed run through all the levels while running at I don't know 100 miles per hour.
And then he had like big machine guns, big bazookas. So very interesting. Like, imagine you're somebody who lives on the island and you see that it's just blowing stuff up,
Yeah.
like it's Team Fortress 2 or
It
something.
is, yeah, it is like that. And I summoned a lot of other NPCs, and he was shooting at them, and they were shooting back at him, and he threw a grenade into one of the
Cavern.
caves.
I love that. I love that. That was so much fun. I know Dear Esther's supposed to be a somber, beautiful game about grief, but honestly it doesn't really feel like a game. It just feels like an immersive experience that kind of whisks you into this juggernaut of fatalism. And it's beautiful to experience, and I think it's good if you yourself are particularly processing grief, which kind of segues into the next question. What do we make of how the character processes grief? And I'd like to hear your opinions on that.
I think it shows that he has a very complicated approach to grief, which everyone does because, sometimes it comes, sometimes it goes. And I think what this whole game was about was that he's trying to come to terms with his grief, but at the end, he can't but succumb to his emotions because at the very beginning we see that at the beginning of the first level, we see this science chemistry textbook next to the Bible. And when you think about it and you think about all the circuits on the walls and stuff, it's supposed to imply that he is trying to understand where his emotions come from. Because he draws pictures of neurons, which is, these parts in your body, that are connected to your brain, and they are responsible for, I guess, giving you conscious thought in a way. And, that leads to feelings, and that leads to consciousness. Okay, I'm not a science expert or anything, but that's what I remember from high school. So, yeah, so basically, he's trying to understand his emotions in terms of science. He's trying to, but it's not successful. So he turns to religion, but that doesn't really help either, because at the very end, he ascends the tower and he jumps down like he's committing suicide, and he turns into a bird, which is symbolizing that he has finally been freed from all of his earthly burdens.
Which is a very beautiful ending, that the transcending, it's very, very beautiful. And again, the processes, it's a very complicated thing. As someone, I myself right now, going through grief, you never get over it. It's just something you get through it, if you will, if you ever do. And the grieving process is never linear. It has its ups and downs. For example, last night I had a delayed reaction from seeing the Spider-Verse, and I cried for 2 hours very, very intensely after having a really beautiful experience in that. And mad props to people who made that movie. Y'all did it so beautifully. Just made me bloody cry like a baby. Thank you. But a good way to process grief. And but how the ending goes, where he transcends into a bird, it's very vague. So that leads to the next question. The ending is very vague. You know, that's the thing. How do we discern what happens? Does the character kill themselves and ascend spiritually? Do they just transcend death beyond earth? And given the interpretation of however you want to interpret this, is this a good ending, or is it something that's kind of vague and not satisfactory? Or what are your opinions? I personally felt it was very beautiful, made me cry, but I'd like to hear your opinions on this.
I think it's good because I mean the whole point of Dear Esther is that it's very open, and I guess it's not supposed to have a clear narrative because you can interpret it however you want. So I like it. You know, it fits. If it had a very obvious ending or, you know, a shock or a horror ending with, you know, him brutally dying as he crashes from the tower, that would not be it would not fit the theme and the intent of this work.
No, it wouldn't. So it actually, and I feel like many of these games from the Chinese realm, I think they're meant to be like a surreal journey into the dreamscape. This is what they feel like. I
Mhm,
think that's what they're meant
exactly.
to
I
be
feel
like.
like it too. So finally, what can we learn from Dear Esther?
Hmm. I think we can learn that it is to grieve is to be human, and that grieving itself is a very, very difficult process that leads us into a very deep, dark place for a long time. And we emerge and we reemerge. We can emerge into the light, we can reemerge into the darkness. It weaves and bobs back and forth like the tempestuous tides of the ocean and it's never linear, and the pain still remains. No matter how much as we try to reason or process it still remains. And maybe not so much the grief of loss, but what could have been, and the losses that were experienced while in life. Maybe it's not so much the absence of the person, but the the absence of what could have been accomplished, what love could have been shared while they were alive makes it hurt the most. And then I think the happiness that was gleaned that will no longer be there. I guess to quote the lyrics from that one Aha song, um, the uh, the good memories hurt more than the bad ones do. And I think this is what this game imparts. I think it's a lesson in accepting the fact that you have to grieve and not letting it overtake you, but you choose to fly with it. It's such a difficult journey. Sometimes you don't take flight. Sometimes you won't take flight until much later. But I feel like this is what Dear Esther imparts, and it's a difficult game to process. It's a difficult game to comprehend because it's not a game. It's an emotional experience, and I think for many people that can be something hard to process. But I think for people who are grieving, I would recommend this game. It I guess it makes the bitter pill go down a little bit better.
Mhm. Right. What was your favorite level? Was it the caves?
Ironically, it wasn't the caves. I think it was the fine. I mean, the caves were very beautiful, and I think there was a lot of symbolism that equated to moving on. Like, don't be like the paper ships that got stuck into the currents. But I think my favorite one is the last level when we are emerging and there's candles and there's these many paper ships set casting out into the waves, and when he climbs the tower, and then when we're seeing the Bible verse read in its correct order,
Mhm.
it imparts a message of hope that
Right.
we we do ascend to the shining city, the light that shines around us.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it is really such a beautiful game, and I really hope that people talk about it more again. Maybe it can even be ported to VR. It would be really cool to explore in virtual reality.
I really hope it does. That is one thing I think people take advantage of. Games like this that can be experienced through VR, maybe make it interactive, like you can pick up a can or something, or swim or something, or pretend you're swimming.
Exactly. Yeah, it would be fun to swim, and also maybe just add really basic things, maybe notes that you can read instead of just listening to the audio.
I would think so too, and I think maybe tweaking the lines a bit, because purple prose is beautiful. I mean, not gonna lie, this is like adding a lot of damask fabric and lace, but if you do it so heavy, you're going to alienate most of your audience, because no one is studying complex literary terms. No one's going to understand what the Maladorian's malfeasance of transcendence. No one's going to understand these things really. And also, would a man of science say this? That's the thing that bugs me. Like, would a man of science say this? Because I feel like doctors would, even if they did like this sort of thing, I think they would tone it down a little bit. Like, they're not going to say the Maladorius transcendence or something. They're going to say something more scientific, like, oh, my neurotransmitters are not connecting properly, and thus is producing this ill effect upon me. I mean, that's what you would say,
He sounded like a literature professor, not, a man of science. So,
No.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's the only thing about it that I would critique. And I really liked it. It was such a great experience. And we played it at just the right time, because at that time, I think you were really struggling with your grief.
I was. This was, I think, a few weeks after my father passed away. My father passed away March 31st at 7:08 of this year. And I remember getting the phone call, and it was so devastating. And it's not that I haven't experienced death before, but processing the grief of my father, it still hurts. I even felt it last night. I didn't think it would be so intense, but I wasn't even planning to see the movie, the Spider-Verse movie, but I went to see it, and I'm so glad I did. And it was a good catharsis. And yeah, I was it was done so good. It was done, and I feel like maybe my dad urged me to see it. So maybe as a way to say more of a sorry, or maybe an assurance. It's hard to tell. I mean, I'll probably be making a podcast about this, so I can just tell everybody how good the second installment of this brilliant trilogy is.
Right. All right. Thank you so much for having me. Well, I mean, we're both hosts, so having each other. But yeah,
thanks for discussing this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we really should talk more about video games. We played another video game that it was very touching last year called Journey, and we still haven't made any podcast about it.
That's true. We have not. We need to. I still didn't beat that final level in Journey, so I haven't ascended yet. Which, Journey is a beautiful game, and it's a wonderful testimony to friendship and not being afraid to leave your comfort zone. And it's something, how so simple a game can have such a profound effect. And when you played it and you won it, where you transcended the final level, I just bawled. It was so beautiful.
It was. And the person who meets up with you, you never find out who they are until the credits end, and then you can see their Steam name. But I mean, it's your choice whether to contact them or not. I mean, it could be a creepy 60-year-old man. You don't know who it is, but you had to work together with that person to pass the final levels.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully most of the stories everyone's experienced with Journey, hopefully they've been very touching stories where you find someone who's very much like yourself, and you have a beautiful friendship like Gwen and Miles, which is something I enjoyed. I will talk about that on my next podcast thing.
All right. See you.
See you. Bye.
Bye.